Let's go over how to achieve this type of parallax in Godot. This creates a similar look to the pseudo 3D or 2.5D parallax that you can see in Hollow Knight. And it's also the same method that I use whenever I create scenes. This method will operate on the 2D game engine. First, you open a scene. So we will start by making a tile map, and I'll just place some random gray blocks in order to establish our playable area. Next, we go into new node and search for canvas layer, and we make 7 canvas layers, and we name each canvas layer from -3 to 3. Now that we have each canvas layer, we can drop some sprites straight into the scene. So with each canvas layer selected, you drop a sprite and you will see that it will become a sub sprite of that canvas layer. And for now, we can just drop some assets into each canvas layer. Our canvas layer named 0 is what I tend to view as our playable area. Now we click on each canvas layer and click on the tab Follow Viewport. We checkmark Enable and then we adjust the scale. This scaling will directly affect how the parallax looks, and our background elements will have to be scaled less than 1, where 1 means that there's no parallax effect. In our case, our negative canvas layers will correspond to our background, so we will want to scale them down. So for canvas layer -1, we select 0.9. For canvas layer -2, we go 0.8. And for canvas layer 3, 0.7. Now for our positive canvas layers, we do the opposite. So canvas layer 1, we go 1.1. Canvas layer 2, 1.2. Canvas layer 3, 1.3. This scaling reflects how things close to us are scaled up and things far away from us are scaled down. So in this instance, our negative canvas layers correspond to our background and our positive canvas layers correspond to our foreground. It is our canvas layers that are creating the parallax effect. So we could insert a tile map in each canvas layer if we would want to. I prefer to work directly with sprites because it gives me more control over placing each asset. So now we have some assets placed in each canvas layer and we have scaled it, but so far we can't see any parallax effect. What we do next is to go into View and set Preview Canvas Scaling. Now we see everything get shifted. Now if we pan our editor camera, the assets will shift, and the speed at which they shift depends on the scaling we set earlier. Our editor camera now functions similar to how the camera would in-game. So if we want to ensure correct placement of our assets, we need to actually pan and zoom in, similar to how our camera would look in-game. I always tend to have both my game and my editor open when placing assets. That way, when I place my assets, I can directly check if it looks correct in-game. If you want your foreground elements to be slightly darker, the way it is in Hollow Knight, then I recommend that you nest your sprites so that you have one top sprite and all the subsequent sprites as children to that sprite. Now you can adjust the visibility on the top sprite and all the sub sprites will inherit that change. If you also want your background to be blurry, then you need to add a shader. You add a node, you add a blank white texture to it, you set the shader material to shader material, and you add a script to it. The Godot docs actually provides a blur shader that you could copy. Once you have that blur shader working, you adjust the parameter of it to increase the blur. We can also add another large white sprite, adjust the visibility and the opacity of it, and now we can simulate some type of atmospheric perspective. When you're doing this, it can be important to check that you aren't doing anything catastrophic to the performance. So this means not making too many draw calls and not having too large sprites. You can check all of this in your debugger by going into monitor and checking how many draw calls you make, what FPS you have, and how much VRAM you're using. I personally tend to create my entire playable area using gray blocks only, and then afterwards adding sprites to make it look good. This makes it easier to keep your playtesting and game art separate, helping ensure that the game is fun to play before you've added any art. I've also added a link to a Godot blog post, which outlines some of the aspects that I've covered here. This parallax isn't implemented the same way that Hollow Knight was implemented, but functionally it works the same, and this is a better method for Godot's 2D game engine. Bye.